The clouds over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red hot light of the North Star. The earth, walking with blood-soaked feet.
Greetings, as always, and welcome back. You know, back in early September, there was a story in London's Daily Mail, the headline reading, "Putin accuses Europe of spreading hysterical horror stories about a Russian invasion after France and Germany warned of possible attack." Why are European leaders so hysterical in their anti-Russia phobia or their Russia derangement syndrome? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. I want to quickly just hit a couple of headlines before we get to my guest. The Washington Post reports Israeli military begins ground invasion of Gaza City. Palestinians in Gaza City reported a night of heavy bombardment. A UN commission said Israel was committing genocide in Gaza, and Israel rejected the claims as falsehoods. This while Lil Marco Rubio says diplomatic solution for Gaza may not be possible. You think? The U.S. Secretary of State made the comments during a visit to Israel at a press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Also, Trump discloses U.S. targeted a third alleged drug boat from Venezuela, of course, providing no evidence to support the accusation or allegation. The president acknowledged the incident while delivering a warning to Venezuelan President Maduro. And wait a minute, folks, don't send your money yet. Why? Because the U.S. has added Colombia to its list of countries that failed to cooperate on preventing drug trafficking for the first time since 1997. In a stark rebuke to the leftist government in Bogota, Trump, in a statement submitted to Congress, blamed Gustavo Petro's government for surging cocaine production in Colombia, the world's largest producer of the drug. The question is, why is Trump trying to start a war with Venezuela? As we discussed yesterday, is this his seeing the failure in Ukraine and failure in controlling African countries and trying to switch the attention to another conflict, which of course he's starting in South America? On today's episode, the issue before us is, as reported in the Daily Mail early this month, President Vladimir Putin has accused Europe of spreading, his words, hysteria and horror stories after France and Germany warned of a possible Russian attack. Putin said claims by European leaders that Russia would one day attack deeper into Europe were hysteria and horror stories. Recently, French hospitals were ordered to make preparations for an imminent war in Europe, while Germany said it's on alert for Russia's military drills. Why? Where's the evidence? Well, let's talk to my guest. He's a professor of economics emeritus at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, where he taught economics from 1973 to 2008. Currently, a visiting professor in the graduate program in international affairs at the New School University in New York City. Professor Richard Wolff, as always, welcome back.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Wilmer Leon. It is a pleasure to be talking with you.
Well, thank you, sir. You are always so kind and generous when we call, and we always greatly appreciate it. So let me start here, and I'll throw it to you. We keep hearing all of this clamor and fear-mongering about a looming or pending Russian invasion of Europe. I have yet to see Keir Starmer, anybody, providing any evidence to support the claim. Also, and I don't have to go too far back in history to reflect upon this, wasn't it the United States that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, sending the prices for energy skyrocketing in Europe and contributing greatly to the deindustrialization of Germany? Dr. Wolff.
Yeah, it is astounding to me as well, not just to Mr. Putin and others that are involved to watch this kind of thing unfold. Let me begin with the punchline and then show you how I got there.
Mm-hmm.
For me, all of this is a campaign based on one objective, which is to deflect the attention of the European people from the deteriorating economic crisis enveloping Europe. I'll explain it in a minute, why there's a crisis and what causes it. But the number one goal of the leaders of Europe is to try desperately to escape blame for that decline. And the way to do that they've all decided is their best shot at avoiding the blame is by freaking the people out, if they can, about a make-believe danger coming from Russia. The truth of the matter is, historically, for at least the last several centuries, it has been Western Europe that attacked Russia, not the other way around. Let's remember, Napoleon tried to invade Russia and lost. In World War I, the Germans invaded Russia and lost. In World War II, Hitler invaded Russia as a German with the German military, and he was defeated. The history is Russia is the object of invasions and is not the invader itself. And that counts for something. But even if you don't care about history, let's go into it from another angle. The Western European countries are those Germany, Britain, France, Italy, Spain, and the others. But it's countries that were half on the side of the winners in World War II and half on the side of the losers. Italy, Germany, and Spain had fascist leaders, Hitler, Mussolini, and Franco in Spain. And when the war was over, both the winners and the losers understood that they faced an entirely new world. In that world, the power of the West was centered in the United States, which had escaped World War II in the sense that other than Pearl Harbor, no bomb fell, whereas in all those European countries, they were devastated. And the losers also knew that the world was different. They saw what the United States' economic power was, and they also realized that the other winner, if you could use that word for what came out of World War II, was the Soviet Union. And so everything was reorganized around the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, what we call here in the United States the Cold War. And a deal was arranged. The United States would be the center. It would be the economic powerhouse. It would be the politically dominant entity. The US dollar would become the global currency. The United Nations would be located in New York City. The United States would be the dominant world economic power. And the European countries, all of them, would survive by being helped by the dominant Americans. That's the Marshall Plan and all that came after. They would not develop their own military. The United States would take care of it. And with the money they didn't have to raise in taxes for their own military, they could rebuild their war-destroyed economies. And that's what happened. And it's what happened for the second half of the 20th century. And it what happened and continued into the early years of the current century, maybe 2010, maybe 2015. But by that time, which should have surprised nobody, the unique power and dominant position of the United States had passed away. It is true for every country that ever found itself in that position of being the dominant world power. It could enjoy that, usually for a matter of some decades, if they were lucky, a century or two, and then they would fade away. The Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, you can look at them all. The British Empire, out of which the United States emerged, if you'll remember. We made a violent revolution against the British to achieve U.S. Independence. And now it's the turn of the American Empire that occupied most of the 20th century to go into its decline. It's not surprising. It's not even a criticism. It's the way empires work. But you have to be honest and face it. There are still people in Britain who can't face that the British Empire is long gone. And we're at a much earlier stage of our empire's decline. And so most Americans still can't get their head around it. But the people who run this country, they know. And they're led by Mr. Trump and the people around him. And to make a long story short, they made the decision that the best way to hold on for as long as they can to the declining American empire is to take advantage of the countries that lived under the umbrella of the United States. And that's above all the European countries, although it includes our two trading partners, Canada in the north and Mexico in the south. Allies, friends, all of that is now chucked out the window because the United States wants to squeeze each and every one of them to support the United States, because otherwise the decline of the American empire would have gone much further, much faster than it did. And so there's been a kind of attack on all of them. The tariffs are the way they are being attacked. They are being told, we're going to hit you with a tariff. You're going to have to pay a fee to enter the American market. You never had to do that before. Now you're going to be charged an arm and a leg, and we don't care what happens to your businesses that lose business in America because Americans can't afford to pay the price of what they import plus the big tariff on it. And we're going to hit you with even higher tariffs unless you agree to invest huge amounts of money, your money, in our country. That's what Mr. Trump has gotten from the Europeans, the British, the French, the Germans, the Italians. He's gotten it from the Mexicans and maybe from the Canadians, although they're fighting back. That means money raised in those countries, instead of being invested in creating jobs and incomes for their people, are to be brought over here. There's a nice, simple way to explain this. This is a program of the United States ripping off its former friends and allies all around the world, which is Mr. Trump's economic program. I don't think it will work, but it's too early to tell. So I just can lay it out for you as a program. But here's one thing that is already clear. All of those other economies are hurting. German industry is leaving Germany and resettling here. That's what Mr. Trump wants. They're actually thinking of doing it. They haven't done it much. They've given us some promises, but those are cheap and easy. Whether it really happens or not, Lord knows. And if you saw what the ICE did to the South Koreans,
right?
That's a screaming signal to all of them. Think long and hard before you set up an investment in this country, because one hand doesn't know what the other one is doing. They'll invite you with the economics, and then they'll whack you with the ICE. I mean, it's stupid. It's inefficient. It's clumsy. But here's the bottom line. Mr. Starmer in England, Mr. Macron in France, Mr. Merz in Germany, and Ms. Meloni in Italy, and I could go on. They are all leaders whose entire political career, from the time they were teenagers, has been to rise up through the leadership of their country that was subordinating itself to the great United States ever since 1945. That's who they are. That's how they rose up. If they ever said a critical word about the United States, they would never have achieved their dominant position as leaders of those countries. So they are wedded to the United States, which puts them in an impossible situation with their people, because their people are saying, wait a minute, the United States might have been our friend, but right now, Mr. Trump and the Americans are hurting us, killing our industries, bidding them away, whacking them with tariffs. I mean, you have to lead us to fight back, but their leaders can't fight back. They have no way to fight back. So what have they done? They've focused on a whole new story to get away from their being blamed for what they deserve every bit of blame for, being toadies of the United States for 75 years. No. It's the great danger from Russia. Forget that there's no evidence. Forget that there's no history behind it. Forget that the Russians can barely manage Ukraine. Can you imagine what they would have if they had to fight in number countries that are much bigger, much richer, much more militarily equipped than Ukraine was? Come on, this is childish. Let me quote you Professor John Mearsheimer, probably the single most revered authority on international affairs, professor at the University of Chicago. I don't know if he's been on your program or not, Wilbur, but believe me, Wilmer, he answers the way you did. If there's a threat from Russia, show me the evidence. And then he says, looking right into the camera, there is none. This is a make-believe distraction. Desperate leaders of Europe going down, hoping for a few more weeks. But by the way, their time is up. If you saw the masses of people across the cities of France on the 10th of September, literally a week ago, they are screaming, get rid of Mr. Macron, get rid of him. We don't want him. This is not for France. He's the governor put in here by Mr. Trump. You know, Mr. Trump made the joke. He referred to the head of Canada as governor somebody. But in fact, all of the European leaders are being accused by their own people of having become agents of the United States when it is no longer in the interest of their country, if it ever was, to be in that position. We are living through, Wilma, and this is really important, we are living through absolutely historical reorganization of the world economy. And the American people may not want to face it, but the reality is changing, and sooner or later, denying it, which is what the Trump administration is all about, is not going to be understood or accepted by the American people any more than the Europeans are showing it. Mr. Starmer's days in office are numbered, and it's true for Mr. Macron. It's true for Mr. Merz in Germany. Meloni, we're not so clear. It's a different story a little bit in Italy. But these are European leaders that are dying fast, and the hoopla about Russia will not save them.
There, to your point, there's this incredibly large disconnect between what these so-called leaders are promoting and what the people in their countries are experiencing. The quality of life for the European is on a dramatic decline.
Yep.
And one of the things that I say all the time is they had a pretty nice standard of living. If you worked wherever you worked in France or in Germany, in Italy, in Greece, and you were able to reach the retirement age, you lived a very decent life. That now with the changes to healthcare, with the changes to access to education, with the changes to retirement programs, if folks can remember when France wanted to raise the retirement age, and here we were laughing because I think they wanted to raise the retirement age to 65,
to
or maybe it was
64. It was at 62. Okay. They want to raise it to 64.
Right. And now the problem in France, as I understood it, was people French companies were replacing workers as they got towards their late 50s. So then people had to figure out, how am I going to go from 58 to 64? But once they worked that out, once they got to 64, life was pretty good. That all now is changing. Again, Professor Wolff, this is serious business in these countries.
Very, very serious. Let me give you an example from my personal life. My father was born in France, so I speak French. I have since I was born. I was born in the United States, but my father, as I say, was born in France, and I have a connection to that country. Mm-hmm. When I visit my family, as I have over the years many times, I would marvel at the standard of living they enjoyed, mm-hmm. because it really was, in a number of ways, as good or better than what I was familiar with here in the United States. So I used to have to say to my friends, my colleagues, my students, my fellow economics professors, don't keep saying, we live in America's the greatest standard of living. That's simply, I mean, you might like it to be true, and we certainly have a high standard world, mm-hmm. if you compare it to the world, but the highest in the world? No, it's not the case. And I'll give you now some examples. I spent a semester in Paris teaching at the University of Paris on an exchange program. Okay, so when you do that, you become automatically a member of their National Health Service. A certain amount of money is taken out of your salary to pay for your access to the health. I got sick a couple of times, nothing serious, but I went to the doctor, and, I learned very efficient, no army of secretaries. Nobody is fighting with an insurance company to figure out how much coverage. They simply dealt with me, the medications I needed, the tests I needed. And when I said to them, because I wasn't familiar, who do I pay? The kindly doctor took me aside and said in French, because he could pick up my accent, you're an American, right? Yes. He said, well, it's not like America here. You paid for this out of your salary. There is no fee. You will have no fee, not for your tests, not for your visit, not for your medication, not for your follow-up, nothing. Then I discovered that at the university, the professor's salary was the same as mine, pretty much, but he had something I didn't. He had a young child. I had 2 kids. I was already saving as a young person with young children for the money I knew I would need to enable them to go to college. He had no such problem. Why? Because the university in France is fundamentally free. You have to pay your room and board, and most students do that, but you don't pay tuition and you don't pay fees. And that's true in Germany and France and quite a few other European countries. So huge expenses like that, they don't have. Now, when you figure out that they earn as much as I do, but college is not an issue for them and medical care is not an issue for them, the wisdom of what you just said, Wilmer, namely, they have a pretty damn good life. They don't have to worry about, food, clothing, shelter. Those things are easily manageable because the really big, scary expenses, college, medical care, they don't have those.
Even unemployment insurance.
Same thing.
And I'm not sure how that works in France, but I know in Germany, you lose your job in Germany, you're not fearful that now the floor has fallen out beneath you and that the life as you know it is about to cease to exist.
Right. For example, your medical care is taken care of in a national program. It doesn't matter whether you're working at a job or not. It doesn't matter whether you're working at this guy's company or that office or that store. None of that matters. You're covered from the day you're born to the day you die. It's part of, look, it plays the role in the minds of French and German people the way going to the public park does. If you feel like having a picnic with your friends, you grab a blanket and a beer and a sandwich, and you go to the park, and nobody asks you for money, and you don't need any money. That's a park, even though it is beautifully landscaped and very clean, and all the lawns are kept in great shape. So it's obviously costing money, but the way it's handled, it's free to each individual who wants to use it for however many times you do. A lot of the things in Europe are arranged like that, and unless you take account of that, you will misunderstand what it means. Your salary can be somewhat less than an American's, but then all of that is offset by the fact that you have free medical care, free pensions are available for you, and on and on and on. It's remarkable how Americans insulate themselves from the news that it would be hard for them to justify.
And two points there. One is it's easier to accept less money when I have less overhead. That's, I think, the simplistic way to put that. And the other element is we hear all the time, and we hear all the time that the United States has the best healthcare system in the world, and on some levels, I won't debate that, but the issue becomes only if you can access it. So your point about the entry point of access to the system in France or in Germany is universal to the country. Access to the system here depends on where you work, depends on who your insurance company is. For example, my wife just had to have a procedure, and we have health care, but because of the deductible, she had to pay for the procedure up front.
Yeah.
And until the point where we reach the deductible. I mean, that's robbery.
Yeah, it is robbery. A day of reckoning is coming. I don't know when, and I don't know how or where, but you really cannot keep squeezing the population the way we are doing, whether it's with the jobs that aren't there, or the income is too low, or the rent is too high, or the inflation in the supermarket is too much. You keep pecking away at people's ability to live, and it's going to blow up. Look, the divisions and the hostilities racking the United States today, where do they come from? You're putting people into impossible situations, and of course, they're cracking. Those with the most problems are the ones that crack first. But we shouldn't misunderstand that it's the problems that we ought to be addressing rather than debating the particular person who did or didn't crack sooner than the next one.
Kevin Baptiste, thank you very much for that super sticker. And your point about the cracking of the system, Kevin's point, Europe is abandoning public utility policies that the U.S. abandoned decades ago. Is that correct? Go ahead.
Yes, that is correct. Things that the Europeans, Mr. Baptiste, you're absolutely right. Things that the Europeans used to pride themselves on are being taken away. One of the reasons hundreds of thousands of French people went into the streets last Wednesday, the 10th of September, was because the Macron government literally was doing that. Let me just tell you about it, because you'll see it's an illustration of the point you rightly make. First thing, Mr. Macron proposed that two national holidays that have been national holidays in France for many years have been occasions when all businesses were closed and workers had a day off. He proposed to cancel the day off. Those two holidays would no longer be days off. You would have to stay on the job, but you would get no salary increase at all for doing so. Okay, that's a direct assault on the working class person's standard of living. Here's the next one. They're going to cut back on the pension benefits people get, in the amount of money per month that you get. And the third one was a huge cut in the money funding the medical care system. So you're going to have to wait longer for procedures. You're going to have to wait longer in the office for someone to see you, and on and on. It's a direct assault on the benefits that the French have expected. And by the way, the same is going on in Germany, in England, and so forth. It's an assault. They are now going to help their capitalist class, their employers. And the government has to help them because Mr. Trump and the United States are hurting them, and they demand help from their government. And the government is freeing up the money to help them by not spending it on the mass of people. Well, the employers are a tiny minority of the country. The mass of people are the overwhelming majority. So let's call it what it is. The government is serving the rich minority at the expense of the non-rich majority.
And there, you've mentioned the word national a couple of times. It's a national healthcare system. Right, it's a national retirement. And so what also I think gets lost in some of this as we look at the ire of the citizens is the sense of nationalism that we don't have here in the United States. It's not the same. So when Macron starts talking about cutting these holidays and doing these other things, it cuts much deeper in the psyche of the French individual, because this gets to how they perceive themselves as being French.
Not only that, Wilma, you're right. It goes to the psyche, but let me give you an example that I learned from my family. Under the law in France, and by the way, this has been the law in France for many decades, a young person, when she or he graduates from high school or college and enters the labor force, the law requires that the employer, whoever that employer is, foreign or domestic, French or European or American for that matter, the employer must give every worker from day one 5 weeks of paid vacation every year. That's the law. Doesn't depend on a union contract, doesn't depend on who your employer is. Every employer must do that.
And that's partially why the country damn near shuts down in August, because everybody takes August off.
Exactly. Now, many Americans go through an entire lifetime of working and never get 5 weeks of paid vacation. They're lucky if they get a couple, or maybe 3 after 10 or 20 years on the job. So this is an enormously important part of French culture. It means you've got 5 weeks off, which you can spend with your family, with hobbies you have, with sports that mean a lot to you, with being friends with the people you love and are close to you. It's a part of life. It's a part of what they call there the work life, or the life balance with your work. They don't want to have to work all the time. They don't think that's healthy, neither physically nor mentally. And Mr. Macron has suggested, and the people around him have suggested, that that's another place they can force people to take 4 weeks instead of 5, or maybe 3.5, or maybe 4 now, and in a couple of years only 3, just the way they're taking away the holidays, or they tried to. You're watching exactly what Mr. Baptiste asked. You're watching in each country benefits to the people being reduced to free up money for armaments, because the Americans won't protect them anymore, or to help their businesses get through the damage that the United States and Mr. Trump are doing to them. And this, let me assure you, and I don't say this in a threatening way, but to warn my fellow citizens, these chickens are going to come home to roost. I can't tell you how, I can't tell you when, but you're building up a level of bitterness. I mean, there's enormous cutback in Canadian tourism in the United States. Why? Because of what Mr. Trump said and did to Canada. You know, these people are changing their attitudes towards the United States. This is not good for us as a nation. This is not good for our future. What are we doing? This is not, if we have a problem, it's one thing to sit down with our allies and try to figure out how to solve it. We're not doing that. We are attacking them and fighting with them and hurting them along the way to save ourselves. This is a short-run logic with a long run, a disaster.
Before we get to the tariff issue, I just wanted 2 things quickly I want to hit on. One, getting back to this whole Russia derangement syndrome. I think it was last week that there was the report that Poland had shot down some Russian drones. And there's still, as far as I know, there's still some debate as to, first of all, whether or not those drones were armed, and secondly, whether or not, in fact, those drones actually came from Russia. There are some who will make the argument that this was a false flag operation, that someone sent these drones in the Polish airspace so that, similar, I guess, to the sinking of the Maine, to be able to create a scenario. So again, there are those that are going to make this argument that to your point about Russia trying to invade Europe, well, look at the drone situation. Well, we don't know that is as it has been promoted. And the other point I would make is it's important for people to realize that the Russian military intervention in Ukraine started in February of 22. If you go back, I think, to April of 21, you were talking earlier, Professor Wolff, about countries invading Russia. I believe it was Ukraine that sent about 80,000 troops to the Russian border in April of 21. And Putin called Biden and told him, look, Joe, you better move those troops off my border, or my response will be asymmetrical and disproportionate.
Yeah.
And Biden called Zelensky and said, get those troops off the border. This is a fight we don't want to have. So those are little details that people need to remember. Professor Wolff, you can respond if you want to, and then we'll move over to quickly talking about tariffs.
Sure. Look, I hate to see one country invade another. I wasn't happy when Russia invaded the Ukraine, but I'm not naive in the way that the American press would like people like me to be. I know it takes two to tango. I know that a war only happens when all kinds of conditions on both sides make it happen. And I also know that once a war starts, as a great journalist once said, the first casualty in every war is the truth, because each side puts its spin. It's always winning. The other guy's always losing, blah, blah, blah. The United States took advantage of the end of the Soviet Union. That's obvious. It made statements respecting the desire of the Russians not to see NATO pushed up against its borders. And it was pushed up. Despite the assurances that had been given, NATO moved steadily to the east so that it now includes Finland in the north, all the way down to Bulgaria and Romania in the south. And Ukraine, in a way, was the last step. And the Russians decided to make a red line there. You can't go any further. You've done it. We weren't strong enough to stop you. Now we are strong enough to stop you, so you must stop. The United States thought that was a bluff, called the bluff, and discovered, as you do in poker, that you didn't call the right bluff. It's not a bluff. He's got the weapons, he's got the manpower, and he's beaten the crap out of you in the Ukraine, which is the truth for anybody who doesn't want to pretend in their life. I still hope the war stops. I think the country of Ukraine has been the victim here more than anything else, partly its own making, but partly this larger politics of Russia versus the United States, with each country willing to fight to the last Ukrainian. It is a tragedy on many, many levels. But to look for the explanation as if it's all the evil Russians is really childish. And to say, well, they invaded a small country, my reaction is, in Afghanistan, the United States attacked, and Afghanistan is a small, poor country, and nobody wants to say anything about it. We attacked and invaded Iraq. That is a small, poor country that the United States invaded. So invading, if you're a big country and you invade a small one, everybody has the right to question you. But you can't question one of them without questioning the others, or call one of them bad guy and the other one a hero without becoming incredible, non-credible yourself. And I think Americans need to understand that for the Russians, this has always been a defensive military adventure, and the clue as to why that's reasonable, it's right on their border. Whereas the Europeans participating and the Americans participating on the Ukraine side are not on their border. They are not fighting a defensive war. It would make no sense. And that's a reality. You got to deal with that sort of thing. And about the drones in Poland, immediately after that was first opened, Putin got on the Russian television. I watched it on Russian television. That was broadcast here in the United States too. And he said, I don't know what this is about. We are not intending any harm to the Polish government or people or military. And we'll look into it and let us sit down. I will send the top leaders of Russia You send the top leaders of Poland. We'll figure out what happened here and what we need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's about as much as you can ask, you know. And that was not accepted. The Poles didn't. The Polish people didn't accept it. The Americans, all the Europeans wanted to do was once again demonize Russia. They didn't care what the details were. It's a little bit like how people are using the killing in Utah for whatever their political purpose is. That's what happens, and it's sad, but it means talking about the actual events and the reality of them becomes almost secondary.
Let's quickly move over to a discussion, and you hit on this a little earlier, as it relates to these tariffs. As we look at the weak jobs report, we look at the numbers being revisited and the report being corrected over, I guess that's July and August. Why are Republicans, which are traditionally an anti-tax party, why have they just so quickly accepted Trump's crazy tax policy, which we now disguise as tariff? What do you see as being the motivation here with the Republicans really turning on some of their most fundamental elements and premises in terms of what they stand for as a party?
Well, I think the fundamental reason is that the Republican Party, and for that matter, the Democratic Party too, have reached a dead end, and that they are really, and I use this word carefully, desperate. And let me explain why. For a very long time in the United States, the power of the employer class, the 3% of our people that are employers, have been extremely successful in gathering into their hands the profits created by the working class and becoming very rich as corporations and indeed as individuals as well. And they have quickly understood what a small minority that becomes very rich always understands, which is they are vulnerable. That by the very fact that the vast majority of people are not rich and that they are rich, it's only a matter of time before people among the majority are saying to themselves, hey, we're the majority, we ought to be able to pass the laws, etc., that spread the wealth a lot less unequally than it is now spread. And so to protect themselves, they buy the political system. They make sure that the president, the senator, the congressperson, whoever, the mayor, is friendly to them. And what does that mean? It means don't tax us. We want you to do a lot of things for us, but we don't want to pay. We want you to get the taxes out of the working class. And the politicians do that. But they keep doing it because the economy grows and they need more and more. So they keep squeezing the working class until we have what we called in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the Great Tax Revolt. That's when the working people said no. And the Republican Party said, great, we'll be the party that represents you. That way they could win the working class back away from Franklin Roosevelt and the Democratic Party. We'll be the party that makes sure your taxes don't go up, which the working class was desperate to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now they didn't get the tax money they needed from the working class. They couldn't raise it. Meanwhile, the rich were, as they always were, you ain't going to touch us. What was found by the Republicans and Democrats to solve this dilemma was borrowing. They decide, we can borrow the money, then we don't have to tax neither the rich and the corporations on the one hand, nor the mass of the working class on the other. We'll just borrow the money And let me remind you, in 1970, the debt of the United States, total borrowings, about $375 billion. Today, it's 37 trillion. That's an increase that far outgrows everything else in our economy. We're a crazy debt-driven economy now, the biggest debtor country on earth. But here's the problem that answers your question. We are now so deeply indebted that the people who used to lend to the government, and who are they? Corporations and the rich. They're the only ones who have the money, and a few other countries. They're the ones who lend to Uncle Sam. But he's borrowed so much, 37 trillion, as I speak to you, that they don't want to lend anymore. You're too risky as a country. We used to have a AAA credit rating. We don't anymore. There are plenty of countries that do. We're not one of them because we have borrowed too much. So now, what are we going to do? We need to have a military all over the world. We need to do all these things. Our people are angry, want more. And where's the money? You can't tax. You can't borrow anymore. Mr. Trump has come up with a clever device. That's all it is. Tariffs. The wonderful thing about it, it doesn't have the word tax in it. You're quite right, Wilmer. It is a tax. It's a tax on everything that comes into the United States from abroad. Every French wine or Brazilian coffee or Japanese electronics, whatever it is, if it comes into the United States, we're going to hit it with a tariff. That brings money into the government. It doesn't have to tax the people directly, and it doesn't have to tax corporations and the rich people in general. It just goes after the particular companies that bring stuff in. And why is that clever? Because the government knows and encourages those companies to turn around after they've paid the tariff and jack up the prices to the consumers to recoup the money. We had experienced it as rising prices, but we don't see it as the tax that it basically is. That's why we have tariffs. It's a hustle. It's a way to squeeze the American working class, but make it appear to be an inflationary problem rather than the tax increase of a government that has exhausted its ability to tax the workers, will not dare tax the corporations, borrows from them instead. Look, let me give you an example that will blow the minds of many of your listeners and your viewers. One of the largest lenders to the United States government is the People's Republic of China. It's the second largest creditor. So let me repeat. The United States is the world's biggest debtor, and China is the number 2 country in the world. It owns about $750 billion, with a B, billion dollars worth of the debt of the United States as it has borrowed. Because of that debt, the United States government has to pay interest to all the holders of its debt, just like anybody who borrows has to pay interest in the normal affairs of life. Okay, if you have $750 billion of U.S. Treasury securities, which the Chinese have, and we pay them about 4%, well, roughly, interest every year, it means every year the United States government collects something on the order of $30 to $40 billion of our tax money, yours and mine. All the government in Washington does is collect those billions and hand them over to Xi Jinping in China, which the Chinese are free to use for anything they want, including their military capability. We fund their army. And if you've never heard this before, you and I both know why. Because it would focus attention on what we are doing in this country And what we are doing is avoiding taxing corporations and the rich, because if we did tax them, we wouldn't need to borrow, neither from them nor from the Chinese, and this whole absurdity wouldn't be staring us down the face. So it's left to people like me to explain it to the American people so they can begin to think about what it means.
So, in 2 minutes or less, as we watched that tremendous military parade about 10 days ago,
We
and
should
it was
take some pride. We should take some pride. That's my nickel that's in there.
and we saw stealth bombers, we saw in-flight refueling, we saw F-35 jet, U.S. Chinese equivalents. We saw hypersonic missiles, and the question is, how can China afford this level of military development at the same time that their economy is growing well beyond rates of the U.S. economy? And the answer is because we're helping to pay for their weaponry.
That's right. In part, it's absolutely in part.
Mm-hmm.
They keep growing. Look, the new estimates of the United States economic growth this year is under 2%. The Chinese are anticipating excess of 5%. The Indians in India, 7%. I mean, and it's been this way now for many, many years.
Right.
They've caught up. Not only have they caught up, not only do they have a booming economy, but they're the center of manufacturing for the whole world.
In fact, when you say China is estimated to grow at 5%, that's low for China. If you look at it over a 5 or 7 year span.
Yeah, and they're working hard to get it back up to the 6 to 9% that it used to be.
Exactly.
But Americans have to face what this means, and that they're not doing. And they're enjoying a president who acts like he's Mr. Tough Guy, who can, knock out the boat in Venezuela waters, and who can do this and who can do that. It's flim-flam man. That's what we got here. We got a flim-flam man, and we ought to understand that while that might be an amusement for 10 minutes, beyond that, it becomes dangerous if you run a society like that.
The guy bankrupted a casino.
Yeah.
What more do I need? This brilliant businessman that we hired to run the country couldn't run a money printing operation called a casino.
Right.
So, as we get out, what's the one rule of a casino? The house always wins.
That's right. That's why the roulette wheel has those special places on it. Yeah.
The house always wins unless Donald Trump owns the house. Professor Wolff, as always, thank you so much for your time. Greatly, greatly appreciate that analysis, and looking forward to having you back.
My pleasure as well, Wilmer. I really appreciate it. And I want to just say personally to your audience, it's priceless to have a program that is open to looking at these things honestly, not shying away, not repeating what the mainstream has to say. This is very valuable, probably more now in America than it's ever been.
Thank you for that unsolicited vote of confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, you deserve it.
Well, Professor Wolff, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Look forward to having you. All right. Wow. That's special. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. And let me direct your attention to Popular Resistance. I'm trying to pull it up here. Popular Resistance has just published my latest op-ed, which is entitled, give me 1 second here, I always forget the titles. I want to give you the exact title. The exact title of my piece. And it is, what is it called? Charlie Kirk's racist, xenophobic rants are not protected speech. Charlie Kirk's racist, xenophobic rants are not protected speech. And I'm getting feedback from Regis Tremblay. This was an excellent article. Thank you, Regis, for that compliment. My cousin Ray, hey, cuz, you're on point. Yes, you can repost this. And so anyway, you can find it right now at Popular Resistance, and hopefully it'll be up on a number of other sites. But I strongly suggest you take some time, take a look, take a read. Charlie Kirk's racist, xenophobic rants are not protected speech, and you can find it at popularresistance.org. Thank you, Dr. Margaret Flowers, for running the piece. Also, stay tuned. New episode tomorrow, and my guest. My guest tomorrow is Dr. Jim Kavanaugh. Dr. Jim Kavanaugh is going to join us tomorrow. Please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show, and again, I must remind you, I must implore you, I must beg you, please subscribe on Patreon if at all possible. Again, leave a review, share the show, trying to get to 10,000. We're real close, and that will make a significant difference for us to help keep us on the air. Remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a blessed remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.